Hello, welcome to Drinking with Comics, new comic book day and a beer. I'm Sean, and I'm going to go through my poll for you, which my poll was small this week. However, I didn't get everything that was in my poll because of extenuating circumstances, but I did get some things that I did not expect to be picking up today, and I'm super excited about them. So let's get into it. But first, the beer. This is my second take making this video. So this was my last can. I bought this six-pack the other night, plowed through it pretty quick. It was delicious. So I can't report it, but this is the Yeehaw Brewery. So this is a Tennessee brewery. This is their Dunkel, and I was in the mood for something dark but kind of light, and this fit the bill, man. This is a delicious fucking beer. Like, wow. So, cheers. Mm, hot damn. All right. So one of the things I did not expect to get, this was free. I think this is brilliant promotion on Vault Comics part, and I really hope this book catches on. I'm definitely adding it to my poll. This was not on my radar at all. This is Beyond Real. This is the first issue. So this is by Zach Kaplan, Fabiana Mascolo, Tony Vizula, Jordi Belair, Tony Vizula did the colors, and Hassan Atsmani Elahu is the letterer. Vault, I mentioned recently on I think the latest episode of A Most Horrible Library, Chris Saunders and I had a discussion about, you know, there's been a lot of kind of startup publishers in the last 5 years or so, maybe going back a little bit further, that really hit hard for a year or two and then kind of disappear. Like Black Mask comes immediately to mind. Not that they're not still publishing, but it just goes from like, oh wow, they've got a lot of stuff to like every so often. And that always hurts my heart. And I tend to latch onto these companies. So Vault was one. I think starting in 2019, they had a book that was ancestral horror called The Plot, and that put them on my map. They also had the same year Black Stars Above, which I loved. I'm forgetting what else, but those were the two big ones that introduced them to me. The Autumnal was another. That was a big one. That got a lot of press. I heard that talked about in a lot of like horror podcasts and whatnot. This was just such a pleasant fucking surprise. It's a couple. She's a struggling artist, and he is, I guess, like a social engineer, kind of like a philosopher. He does TED Talks. They're kind of romantically discussing the nature of being, and is it a computer simulation? Is it this? Is it that? And they get in a car accident, and then afterwards one of them comes out of it and one of them remains in a coma, and the one that comes out of it starts to experience really really weird stuff, and then we start to go into playing with reality. I thought it was really well done. It's a pretty verbose first issue, but it never felt taxing. I didn't feel like there was like any kind of information dump at any point. um it was more or less like really elegantly done, especially when you get into some of the really stranger concepts in the back half of this issue. I thought they did a really good job with it. And it was literally after the accident, it was just a page turner because I wanted, like, where is this going? What is happening right now? And so they hooked me. So, Vault, I think, at least for me, your promotion of giving this away free really worked. I don't know if that was everywhere. I don't know if it was the first so many customers. I went into my shop really early, but I saw them hand it to a couple different people, and it looked like it was just in everybody's pull box, and they'd be like, oh, this is free. So, yeah, it worked. I'm signing up. Vault, thank you. The only one of the three books that I picked up that was on my actual pull is X-Men Red 18, and I'll get to that in a minute. This is the final issue of X-Men Red, or at least as far as we know. We now, starting in January, the X books are going to transform into this, the fall of the House of X, Powers of X, whatever. I've talked about that at length. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I am going to really fucking miss X-Men Red. And this book, last year on SeanCBaker.com, every year I do my favorite comics of the year. Last year, Immortal X-Men was my favorite comic of the year. This was, I had added a caveat that I removed the Silver Coin, Michael Walsh's horror anthology, and Brubaker and Phillips' Reckless books from the running because they just killed the curve. So, setting them aside, my favorite comic last year was Immortal X-Men. I feel like Immortal X-Men, I'm not 100% sure about it anymore. The last issue, as I said on this show, was I felt like it just felt like a misstep. I think they could still definitely recover though. But X-Men Red has just become increasingly fantastic. And this was just a fucking awesome final issue. I don't know how Arakko, i.e., Mars, is going to fit into the future, but it fucking better, or I will be very disappointed. I love Storm. I love DaCosta. I loved Apocalypse, his name now isn't Apocalypse. They're saying it it's like an unpronounceable symbol. I love that. This book, man, I just hope we get some book that picks up after whatever is going to happen in the next, the first quarter, first two quarters of the next year. I really hope we get a book that chronicles Mars and that Aurora stays on it. I just, man, I can't say enough. Really, really, I'm going to miss this book. Love it. So Enfield Gang Massacre #5 came out. That's going to be held at my shop in Chicago, thanks to my co-host Mike Schinnebarger. So I won't read that for a while, which is fine. I read the first two issues, and it's been so sporadic with me getting them. So I'm really just going to hold off and read them all in one fell swoop. And then Phantom Road, the Jeff Lemire book, which I adore. My shop didn't get the 5 copies they ordered, so it wasn't in anybody's puller on the wall. So I'm hoping next week we'll see. What I did pick up, however, I had no like this wasn't even on my radar, and I even though Mike has gotten me to do some Batman stuff recently, and I enjoyed it, I'm always suspicious of DC and Batman because it's he's been strip mined. So this is Raphael Grumpa and Matthias Lopes. This is the Gargoyle of Gotham. Not on my radar. This cover, this is a second printing. This caught my eye, and I had to grab it. And #2 came out as well. So I looked. It looks like this is a 2-issue thing. I only read the first issue so far, and I fucking loved it. It's a different continuity. It's Earth 46, I think I read somewhere. I don't know where that falls in their tiers of reality over at DC, but this reminds me of Bernie Wrightson's Batman the Cult. Reminds me of when Morrison and Quitely were doing Batman and Robin, but it was Dick and Damian. There's some definite comparisons I could make with the art between Raphael and Quitely, but he's definitely his own thing. And this book, everything about this book, the design of Batman, they don't refer to the Batmobile as a Batmobile. They call it the silent or the blind machine because there are no windows. It's just steel, like it's impenetrable steel where there should be windows. So it runs solely on sonar and GPS. I thought that was just crazy awesome. And also, I just don't like hearing the word Batmobile. It's just lame. It's just overdone. Not a traditional rogues gallery. It's another thing about Batman that drives me nuts. I don't ever need to read a Joker or any of the traditional rogues gallery. I don't need to ever see any of them again. I really liked Morrison's run where we had like Professor Pig and the Black Glove. To me, that's where the future of Batman lies if I'm going to read it. And this introduces somebody, I don't know who they are. There's no name yet, but it is, oh man, this is a horror book in a lot of ways. It is creepy as fuck. And I just loved everything about this first issue. Everything. Very excited by this. I'm going to read #2, but I think Mike and I are going to cover this book. So look for that in a future episode. And then last thing, this is just kind of like it wasn't something I picked up this week, but I wanted to mention I'd been really jonesing for some Warren Ellis, and I had sitting out the first 3 volumes of the original Ultimate Fantastic Four. I haven't read it since shortly after it came out, probably. And so I was like, you know what? I'll read this. And I realized the first volume actually isn't Warren Ellis. He doesn't take over to volumes 2 and 3. The first volume is Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Millar. So this is really like where the original Ultimate Universe kind of kicked off. I'm not a huge Fantastic Four fan. I've always liked the team. I've almost never read it, like just special issues and whatnot. Yet I'm very much excited for the MCU to introduce them. Whether or not I actually see the movie, we'll see. I think that's one I will see. I've largely just suffered fatigue from all the movies. But so I started rereading this, and it's been, like I said, probably at least 10 years since I read this last. And this is this is really good. Uh, and we're not even to the Alice stuff yet. But and he's perfect for this with the science angle. But man, this I'm really, really enjoying just the origin story, which I mean, we've talked about on here before. Origin stories when they've been paraded by you ad nauseum in the 21st century because there's been this many retcons and this many restarts and this many retellings. Who wants a fucking origin story for these same characters over and over again? But this, I don't know, maybe it's because I haven't seen any of the Fantastic Four movies to date. I haven't really read the book. I know who they are, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's because I haven't actually engaged with their actual origin story before. I've never read Fantastic Four #1, like in the Marvel Masterworks or whatever. But really, really enjoying this so far. So I just want to kind of give a shout out, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with it. That's Drinking with Comics, New Comic Book Day and a Beer. Take another sip of this delicious Dunkel, and cheers. We'll be back soon, Mike and we'll talk about some more good comics. Hi, I'm Sean. Join me and my friends every week for the Horror Vision, where we talk about horror movies.